Hey everybody, welcome to week 2. This is Professor Malat. Let me get right to it and share the screen. I have a couple of short presentations to do for you this week, so hopefully this won't take too long, but let's take a look at week 2. So you'll see here, week 2, I don't really have a whole lot put up for you, and I did that for a reason. We do have a little bit more reading than usual. We're starting out with chapter 3, just the first part of chapter 3, the section called Walking into the Party. I'll call up our book. As you see, this is just a short section, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And then we have from chapter 2, two sections, Reading and Writing for Conversational Inquiry, and rhetorical reading, the reader's role in conversational inquiry. So you can see here, there's kind of a theme, and it has to do with conversation. So here are the two sections from chapter 2. This one's a little bit longer. And then the second section. We're skipping the section on genres because we'll come back to that in our second writing unit a little bit later in the semester, and this is rhetorical reading, the reader's role in conversational inquiry. So I have this theme of conversation, and I want to launch into my little brief presentation here. Get my PowerPoint slides up. So this week, even though the topic is cataloging and comparing conceptions of writing, you are in the midst of these writing assignments that ask you to think about your conceptions of writing. However, I want to explore this idea of writing as conversation. Some of you in your journals and in the discussion board talked about how writing is kind of a way for you to gather your thoughts. It's a way for you to express yourself and express your ideas. And that's a form of conversation. So in chapter 3, we see in that section, Walking into the Party, they present us an overview of what the rhetoric scholar or writing studies scholar Kenneth Burke wrote about back in 1941. Burke used this metaphor of what he called the unending conversation. And this is just a short segment from his book, The Philosophy of Literary Form. Imagine that you enter a parlor. You come in late, and when you arrive, others have long preceded you, and they are engaged in a heated discussion, a discussion too heated for them to pause and tell you exactly what it's about. In fact, the discussion had already begun long before any of them got there, so that no one present is qualified to retrace for you all the steps that had gone before. You listen for a while until you decide that you have caught the tenor of the argument. Then you put in your oar. Someone answers, you answer them. Another comes to your defense, and another aligns himself against you to either the embarrassment or gratification of your opponent, depending on the quality of your ally's assistance. However, the discussion is interminable. The hour grows late, you must depart, and you do depart with the discussion still vigorously in progress. So the idea here, especially as it pertains to academic writing, which is what we're concerned about in this course, is that through your reading and your writing, you're engaging in what we call a scholarly conversation. Think of it as a conversation that, as Burke says, is unending. It began long before you, and it'll still continue long after you are gone, once you've left the party, quote unquote, right? So, and to me, this is just kind of mind-blowing when you think of yourself as a reader and a writer, that you are able to engage in a quote unquote conversation, right? When you're reading something, you could read something from the ancient Greeks, right? Or the Epic of Gilgamesh from ancient Mesopotamia. You are reading the ideas and the thoughts of another person who came thousands of years before you. And when you write about it, you are engaging in a conversation. You are having a conversation with the mind of another, even though that person may no longer be around. You're still engaging in this conversation. And I think that's just such a cool idea that we as readers and writers, as literate people, are engaging in this conversation. So what the textbook is actually trying to make a point of here is that when you're doing research, it's not just looking up facts and figures and trying to support your points. Yes, that's a part of it, but research also plays out like conversations at a party, with each new publication and presentation representing a turn in that ongoing conversation, right? So it's your opportunity to dip in your oar, to take part in the conversation, to say, okay, this is how I think about things, right? So given the relative newness and the accessibility of its methods, there are ample opportunities to make real contributions in the field of writing studies. And you can do this as a student. There are other writing researchers and teachers who are interested in what students learn about writing, even undergraduate students. And there are places where you can actually publish your work. So I think this is really just such an exciting part of writing studies and rhetoric and composition that unlike other fields, we're welcoming younger voices that have new and fresh perspectives. You might be able to ask and answer questions that weren't asked before. So if we go into chapter 2 and we look at reading and writing for conversational inquiry, we see that conversational inquiry is a form of collaborative reading and writing, right? It's not something that you do solely alone. You're collaborating with others. And it's used to seek answers to questions that have yet to be answered, right? It's new and it's exciting. And then these research-based arguments not only rely on facts, as I said before, but also on researchers developing interpretations of data and facts and coming to that new knowledge and a new understanding of things. Academic arguments also seek to build a consensus in order to advance a field's understanding of a particular phenomenon. So it's really important to have that conversational give and take. It's important to have that collaboration with peers. So I'm hoping in this course that we will have opportunities where you can work together and bounce ideas off one another and, you know, grow to have a new understanding of what it is to be a writer in the 21st century, right? 21st century? Yeah, 21st century. So we continue in chapter 2 with rhetorical reading. So the idea here is that you're not just reading for information, right? Meaning doesn't just exist inside of the text, but rather you bring something to that conversation with your education, your experience, your cultural background. Both writers and readers are actively constructing meaning from those texts. It's not just the meaning is embedded, but you bring something to it and develop new meaning and construct new meaning from that text. Rhetorical reading means that you're reading mindfully. You're looking at how the texts are essentially other people talking and reading. And this is a process of interacting with those people. Again, we come back to that whole idea of the scholarly conversation that, you know, you can engage with the mind, excuse me, the minds of others. And just like writing, reading is shaped by context. So I want to take a moment here to pause. And that's just a basic overview of the readings, but I'm going to do a little bit of a review for you where we're actually talking about the phenomenon of the rhetorical situation. So let me just take a moment to pause here and get my materials ready for you. Okay, so here I have a presentation that was put together by the Purdue OWL staff. This is a little bit of a recap of understanding writing, the rhetorical situation. Now, hopefully, this is not new information for you. You should have had at least some kind of introduction to the rhetorical situation in your Comp 1 classes, whether it was here at UC or if you took Comp 1 in another college or university. You should have a little bit of familiarity with the rhetorical situation. However, I do want to review it because I do think it's important information, and it is related to this whole idea of taking part in the scholarly conversation. So let me advance to the next slide. So what is the rhetorical situation? Well, remember that rhetoric is using language effectively to persuade, inform, educate, or entertain. So the rhetorical situation is all of those circumstances that are involved in your communication, either as a writer or as a speaker, right? So here's a nice little graphic. We look at the large circle here is the culture, but let's take a look at the particulars. We have you as the writer, or the writer in general. We also have an audience. We have the purpose, as well as the topic, those things that you are writing about, your reason for writing. And then that is all a part of the context. And the context and all of those other things are a part of the larger culture. So if you look at that, you don't write and you don't read in a vacuum. You have culture that contributes to how you perceive things, and all of these factors play an important role in the writing process. So let's take a look at the writer. So we have things that contribute to who you are as a writer. So the writer has the most important role in the rhetorical situation because that is the person who makes decisions about what goes into their paper, right? But there are many things about that individual that affect the way they might write about different subjects. Personal characteristics and interests play a major role in the writer's choice of topics, their position in an argument, and the style selected for communicating with an audience. So your culture, your personal characteristics and interests affect those things that you write about and how you approach different writing situations. So some of the factors that can affect your writing include your age, your experiences, your gender, your location, political beliefs, your parents and your peers, and even your education. So, I mean, for instance, age can play a huge role in how a writer thinks about a topic. If you think about how a 70-year-old would approach a certain writing topic, such as retirement benefits, it would vary quite greatly as opposed to an 18-year-old writing about retirement benefits, right? A 70-year-old, of course, has more investment personally in retirement benefits than an 18-year-old would. An 18-year-old might not care about retirement because it's so far in the future, right? Again, experiences. How would someone who fought in the Vietnam War write about guerrilla warfare differently than someone who has never fought in war? And of course, gender, how might a woman write about the subject of abortion differently than a man might choose to write about it? So those are all different things that contribute to you as a writer or to as a writer in general. So let's go into this next slide on the purpose. Obviously, people compose written documents for many reasons or purposes. Writing purposes can best be expressed in an infinitive statement, to plus verb. So to persuade, to shock, to inform, to entertain, to call for action, or to educate. Those are just 6 examples. So let's see, whoops, I'm sorry. So for instance, if the purpose is to educate, a composition textbook, it could be a medical pamphlet about neonatal care, Could be a magazine article about the differences between computer virus detectors. An example of a call to action could be a letter to your senator about carbon emissions, or a letter to the newspaper editor about homelessness in the community. Or you could even think of advertisements as being a call to action or to persuade. Some examples of how to entertain: it could be a magazine article about a new movie that's come out. It could be a comic strip, or it could be a website devoted to presidential snafus, right? So there are a variety of examples here that call for different purposes. Let's move into genre. Of course, genre is a category or a type of writing, but it's also a very important element when considering the purpose of the writing assignment. Genre is category, but the purpose of writing is shaped by that category of writing and its projected audience. Stephen King, who is an author of horror stories, writes to shock and entertain his audience. Molly Ivins, who is a political writer, tries to persuade her readers through editorials to accept her opinions and enact change. So it's important to keep in mind that genres hinge upon the purpose and needs and expectations of the projected or imagined audience. And we will, as I said before, get deeper into genre in the second unit and talk about the various types of genre and how we can go about analyzing them. So let's move on. Well, I'll talk about the examples. I mean, we think of examples, genre examples, as kind of the various types of text, written text, print media, such as fiction, autobiographical stories, news articles, reviews, letters to the editor, rhetorical analysis, criticism, persuasive essays. But you can also expand that, the idea of genre, to include this whole world of visual rhetoric. So things such as photos and advertisements, those are also types of genres. So as I said, we will get deeper into that as we progress through the semester. Next, we have audience. Like the writer, the audience is affected by many of the same factors that affect the writer. And the audience, of course, is those to whom you are writing. Writers need to use appropriate word choices and tone to appeal to their audiences, and consideration of the factors that define a particular audience will aid in making writing persuasive and effective. So some examples here is, how might a writer who's in favor of gun control write towards members of the National Rifle Association? How might they write to a gun control advocacy group? Or how would they write to an undecided voter? We're very dependent upon our audience, and that kind of affects how we present that information. It affects the type or the genre that we decide to use to be most effective and most persuasive. Another example here is, how might a historian explain the Clinton impeachment trial in a second grade textbook? How might that differ in a ninth grade or a high school textbook? And of course, how will that differ to college students, right? In a college textbook, the information is going to change, the language is going to change, the particular details are certainly going to be different in a second grade textbook as opposed to a college textbook, excuse me. So I think you get the idea here. The one thing that I want you to take away from this class is that I am not your sole audience, right? You are not just writing for your instructor. You need to start thinking about a wider audience and reaching a wider audience. So you have, yes, of course, me, right? And you have your classmates, but also start thinking about the type of audience that you really want to reach in your writing. Excuse me. Next, we come to topic. The topic is that which you will write about. And of course, this is usually the first thing that you think about when you're given a writing situation or a writing assignment. And when coming up with a topic, it's important to consider the parameters of the writing assignment, the projected length of the project, and the complexity of the issue that's being discussed. So narrowing a topic is a very important process that shouldn't be overlooked in your writing. Making a topic more specific and focused can help you as a writer to build a more controlled, a more comprehensive, and a more compelling argument. So an example here is the American welfare crisis is not a topic that could be adequately covered in just a 3-page paper, right? This is a topic that could and most likely would be more appropriately covered in a book-length argument. On the flip side of that, the need for, let's say, a new university bike rack isn't a topic that would be covered in a 20-page assignment. There's only so much you can say about bike racks. So either you would need to broaden that topic to fit the requirements of the assignment, or hope that this is something appropriate for a very short assignment, right? I think you get the idea. And then we come to context. Context is what we call the situation. It's that which generates the need for writing. So the topic and the purpose and the writing audiences are all affected by current events, locations, social customs, and cultural changes, the context. Let's think of an example. 1999 newspaper editorials about school violence were motivated by the Littleton, Colorado school shootings. There were articles about Kosovo refugees, which are written with different purposes in the US than those published in Europe. Computer technology is written about much differently today than it was in the 1960s when IBM was king. So it's important to keep attuned to the social and political and cultural climate of your audience, and that helps you as writers to produce current and convincing writing. So context is yet another thing that comes into play when we are writing. So here is a little summary slide that things that we've covered, and these are the key components of the rhetorical situation. Keep in mind, we have the writer, we have the purpose, the reason for writing, right? We have the audience, we have the topic, we have the context, and then of course, in that big green circle from the first slide, we have the culture. So that is the writing situation, and hopefully that's a nice little recap for you. All of these things you need to keep in mind when you're setting out in a writing situation. I'm losing my voice again. I apologize for that. So that said, let's go back to our course page. Excuse me. To look at what you actually have to do this week besides reading. We have a short paper that is due, and that is the What is Writing assignment. So let me take you to that page. So this may be a little bit confusing, and I think I might actually record a separate video, but I do want to look at it for this overview video, just so that you see that you have an assignment due on Sunday. It's a short writing assignment, roughly 500 to 750 words, but look for an embedded video here at the top of the assignment where I can go into further explanation. I'm giving you a choice between two different presentations of how to think about your conceptions of writing. What is writing? How does it work? So that again will be embedded here at the top of the assignment. But that assignment is due Sunday the 23rd at the end of the day. So yeah, I think that is it for this week. I'm not requiring any journals or discussion boards this week. I figure you will really want to focus more on this short writing assignment. and the readings, and really try to absorb all the things that Wardle and Downes are trying to present to you in the 2 sections in chapter 2 and that 1 section in chapter 3. If you have any questions, I can stop sharing that now. If you have any questions, you know how to get in touch with me. And I'll be more than happy to walk you through and answer your questions. Okay, have a fantastic week, everybody. Bye.